It's strange how life changes in a single moment, how one decision, one delay, or one mistaken seat can alter the course of two lives forever. For Ethan Cole, that moment arrived on a cold November evening when he boarded a train he almost missed, the 7:45 to New York. He wasn't supposed to be on that train at all. His meeting had been canceled last minute, his taxi was late, and by the time he rushed through the crowded station, the only thing he wanted was to get home, away from the chaos that his life had quietly become. But fate, in its silent, mysterious way, had other plans, ones that would change the way he saw love, life, and the meaning of second chances. If you believe in kindness, destiny, and the power of second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, because what you're about to hear is not just a love story, it's a reminder that sometimes the seat we think is a mistake is actually where our life truly begins. The train was unusually crowded that night, its carriages buzzing with the tired hum of people heading home. Ethan moved quickly down the aisle, his briefcase bumping against his knee, his eyes scanning for a free seat. He saw one near the middle, seat 12A, and without checking his ticket, he dropped down with a sigh. His phone buzzed with an email from his assistant reminding him of another meeting the next morning. He stared at it blankly, feeling the weight of 1,000 small decisions that had led him to this lonely, mechanical version of himself. Once, he had dreams of music, travel, and writing, but over the years, they'd been buried beneath spreadsheets, contracts, and deadlines. He was successful, yes, but deeply, quietly unhappy. It took him a moment to realize the seat wasn't empty after all. A soft voice said, "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." He looked up, startled. Standing there was a young woman with chestnut hair tucked under a knitted scarf, holding a cup of coffee that steamed gently in the cold air. Her eyes were warm, kind, but firm. "Oh, I'm sorry," he stammered, fumbling for his ticket. She smiled, not in annoyance but amusement. "It's okay, you can stay. I'll just take the one across." Her voice carried that rare mix of calmness and light that made you want to keep listening. Ethan offered to switch, but she waved him off and sat opposite him instead. As the train rolled forward, the city lights began to fade into the soft darkness of the countryside. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan found himself stealing glances at her reflection in the window. She wasn't on her phone or laptop like everyone else. She was sketching something in a worn-out notebook, a face it seemed, or maybe a skyline. When she caught him looking, she laughed softly. "It's not very good," she said, closing it quickly. "I'm just trying to remember how the city looks from memory." He smiled for the first time that day. "You're doing better than me," he thought silently. He'd forgotten what it was like to create anything from memory. Minutes turned into hours. The rhythm of the train filled the silence between them, and when the heater began to falter, she offered him half of her scarf. He refused, but she draped it over his shoulder anyway. That small, kind gesture, so simple, so human, struck something deep inside him. They didn't exchange names that night, only pieces of conversation that lingered long after the train pulled into the final station. When she stood to leave, she turned to him with that same soft smile. "Next time, check your seat number," she teased. And then, just like that, she was gone. He didn't know her name, he didn't know where she lived, but that one encounter, that one mistaken seat, stayed with him. For weeks, her laughter played in his mind like a song he couldn't stop humming. He found himself looking at strangers on trains, hoping one might be her. He didn't even know why it mattered so much. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone had seen him not as a name on a business card, but as a person. Months passed. Winter turned to spring, and one rainy afternoon, fate, as if amused by its own design, brought them together again. Ethan had ducked into a small cafe near Central Park to escape the rain. He ordered coffee, took the corner seat, and pulled out his laptop. As he glanced up, his heart stopped. There she was, the same girl from the train, sitting by the window, sketching the raindrops on the glass. He froze, unsure what to do. What if she didn't remember him? What if she was waiting for someone else? But then she looked up, saw him, and her face lit up in recognition. "Seat 12A," she said, smiling. That was how it began. not with a grand gesture or dramatic music, just a coincidence that felt too perfect to be random. Her name was Lily Harper, an art teacher who worked part-time while selling her sketches to small galleries. She was gentle, funny, and real. Everything Ethan had forgotten existed in a world obsessed with speed and success. He told her about his job, his loneliness, his forgotten dreams of music. She told him about her students, her love for painting sunrises, and how she believed that people meet for reasons we don't always understand. They started meeting more often. Coffee after work, walks in the park, late-night talks that stretched into dawn. Ethan's world began to change. He laughed more, slept better. The hollow quiet of his apartment felt warmer when he thought of her. Lily became the piece of life he didn't know he was missing. Not because she fixed him, but because she reminded him how to feel again. She believed in simple joys, handwritten notes, slow mornings, watching the sunset without checking her phone. With her, time felt slower, softer, and real. But happiness, as life often proves, is never without its tests. A few months later, Lily was offered a chance to study art in Paris, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Ethan was thrilled for her, but when she told him she was leaving for a year, something in his chest tightened. They promised to stay in touch, to call and write, but deep down he feared distance might change everything. On her last night before leaving, they sat on the same bench where they had their first walk together. The city lights shimmered behind them. She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Some things," she said softly, "are meant to last, no matter how far the train takes us." She left the next morning. Her absence was both sharp and silent. Ethan threw himself into work again, but every time he rode a train, he'd glance at seat 12A, half expecting to see her there. He sent her letters, and she replied with sketches. Small pieces of Paris, drawn with love. But 1 month, then another, and her letters stopped coming. Weeks went by. He wrote again, but there was no reply. His heart filled with a quiet panic he couldn't explain. He checked her social media. No updates. He even called the Art Institute, but they couldn't give him details due to privacy. The uncertainty gnawed at him, until one evening, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at her last sketch, a drawing of a train seat by the window with the words written beneath, "Sometimes the wrong seat is where you're meant to be." He didn't know it yet, but Lily had fallen seriously ill during her stay. A rare infection had left her hospitalized for months. Her letters, she later explained, had gone unsent, scattered in her hospital drawer. She had thought of him every day, but didn't want him to worry. It wasn't until nearly a year later, when she returned home, thinner, paler, but still smiling, that she found the courage to reach out. The day she called him, Ethan was sitting in the same cafe where they'd first met again. When he heard her voice, he froze. It felt like hearing a song he thought was lost forever. They met the next morning at the park. She looked fragile, but her eyes were still full of that quiet light that had first drawn him in. He didn't ask why she disappeared. He didn't need to. He just held her hand and said, "You came back." Their love deepened after that, shaped not by perfection, but by persistence, the kind that survives silence, distance, and time. They spent long afternoons walking by the riverside, planning trips they never took, dreaming of simple things like a shared home, a kitchen full of laughter, and a garden she could fill with her paintings. For Ethan, love had become less about finding someone and more about choosing someone, every single day, even when it was hard. Years later, when they finally married, it was in a small ceremony by the same railway platform where they had met. The guests laughed when Ethan joked about taking the wrong seat that turned out so right. But when he saw Lily walking down the aisle in her simple white dress, tears blurred his vision. He realized that love wasn't something you planned. It was something that found you when you least expected it, often disguised as a mistake. Life after marriage wasn't a fairy tale. There were arguments, tough days, and bills that piled up. But through it all, they never stopped cherishing the small things. A cup of coffee shared in silence, the sound of rain against their window, the comfort of simply being together. When Lily's health faltered again years later, Ethan became her strength, caring for her through sleepless nights and long hospital stays. He read to her, painted beside her, and never once left her side. One winter evening, as snow fell softly outside the hospital window, Lily whispered, "If I ever have to go before you, promise me you'll still take trains. Maybe someday, someone sitting in seat 12A will need the kind of kindness you gave me." She passed away peacefully a few weeks later, leaving behind her sketchbooks and a note that read, "For Ethan, the man who turned my mistake into forever." Years passed. Ethan grew older, grayer, but every now and then, he still took the train, the same 7:45 to New York. He always chose seat 12A, sometimes offering it to a stranger who seemed tired or lost, just as Lily once had. And every time he looked out the window, watching the blur of city lights fade into countryside, he felt her presence beside him, quiet, warm, and eternal. Because some love stories don't end when life does, they live on in the way we remember, in the seats we choose, in the hearts we touch without meaning to. So if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you once loved, or someone who changed your life without even trying, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep stories like this alive for others who might need a reminder that love, even when found by mistake, is the most beautiful kind of destiny. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone by accident who changed your life forever? I'd love to hear your story. Hi,